Welcome back to another edition of Scherable. It is Sunday, January 24th, fourth full day of the Biden presidency. And I want to talk about whether we, as a collective nation, have forgotten how negotiations work. It's been a long time since we've seen actual bona fide negotiating happen on a routine basis. It's not that it never happened in the Trump administration, but even when it did happen, it was always kind of weird. So what does normal negotiating look like? And I say this because we have we've two main negotiations going on right now. One is the Senate organizing agreement, and one is COVID relief. And the fact that the organizing agreement isn't happening right away, McConnell is trying to play what cards he has to get Democrats to abandon any talk of getting rid of the filibuster, is already regenerating calls from some on the Democratic side and the progressive side to do the nuclear option, get rid of the filibuster right away, and get down to business on the rest of the Democratic agenda, largely with party line votes, and using McConnell's initial hesitancy to say nothing's changed here. Same old obstructionism. What are you waiting for? Don't let him pull the football Lucy style once again. And look, there's no reason to trust Mitch McConnell or any other Senate Republican. There's no reason to make grand predictions of bipartisan paradise off the bat. I can't tell you what's going to happen going forward. But it is just bad analysis to assume that because there is an initial disagreement and a beginning of negotiations, therefore, it's the same old obstructionism. We just don't know that yet. It is hardly irrational for Mitch McConnell to see what he can get. Put down an opening bid, see what happens. Now, the reason why they have to do this organizing agreement is the Senate it's not like the House where everybody's up for re-election at the same time. You only get a piece of the Senate up at a time. And so whatever the old organizing agreement is, it stays in effect until you pass a new one. So the committee chairmanships don't get flipped until you pass a new organizing agreement. So there's incentive for Democrats to pass one so they can claim their committee chairmanships. And in a sense, there's incentive for McConnell to delay. They don't want to give their committee chairmanships, but there's also, I think, a great limit on how much they can play this game. Everybody knows they lost the election. They lost control of the Senate. If they're going to sit on their hands and never agree to an organizing agreement, there is potential political cost there. Now, I might have said something similar. I'm sure I did say something similar when the Merrick Garland appointment happened. There would surely be a political cost if McConnell did this all the way through the election, and there wasn't in the short run. So again, I can't predict to you today how far McConnell will take this. I would think that there is a limit to how far McConnell can push this in the middle of an economic and public health crisis. And my best argument for that is what just happened with the last round of COVID relief. McConnell didn't recognize that after there was a Manchin-Romney agreement and Pelosi and Schumer were on board, there was no political upside into blocking that bill. It's better to tweak it than to kill it. Otherwise, the Republican Party would take the blame going into the Georgia runoff elections. So I think there is an understanding there that there's only so far you can take these things. But I mean, a judgeship is something that bases care about. The overall economy and the pandemic is something that everybody cares about. So it's a different dynamic there. Uh, and since Democrats don't have the votes to get rid of the filibuster today, Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema have been flatly against it, and Manchin has repeated himself very recently on that score. You would literally need every single one to agree. So one no vote is enough. They don't have those votes today. Now, Schumer is correct, in my opinion, in not giving away the store today and saying there's no way, no how we would ever do this over the next 2 years, because maybe Republicans would become a giant wall of obstruction, and maybe then Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema and others who've expressed reluctance, like Dan Feinstein and John Tester and Chris Coons, maybe those folks would change their minds if Republicans let Democrats do nothing whatsoever. So I think Schumer has reason to draw a line where he's drawing it. And I would guess that McConnell will eventually say, okay, I can't squeeze this out of you. Let's move forward. Again, I'm not saying that's definitely how it's going to go, but it's not crazy to think that it's going to play out for several more days before McConnell might come to that conclusion. It's wrong to take the knee-jerk view that just because there's an initial disagreement, therefore we're in the same obstructionist place that we were in the Obama years. There's going to be negotiations, and negotiations are going to take several days on almost everything that crops up. Even if we get to a point where Democrats did go nuclear and did get rid of the filibuster, or in the case of COVID relief, if Democrats decide, okay, we have this other route, which is budget reconciliation, which is something already in the rules that allows the party in power to pursue certain legislation without risk of filibuster. They can't do that for every little thing, but you can do essentially once a fiscal year after you pass a budget resolution. And even in that scenario, there will still be negotiations because Democrats don't share one brain. There's a range of view between AOC and Joe Manchin, and getting everybody in the same party to agree on the particulars of COVID relief will still be a negotiation, will still take several days, and quite frankly, there's not a guarantee that they would succeed agreeing amongst themselves. It's not like reconciliation is a guaranteed path of success. There is, I would say, a higher probability you can get something passed in that way, but in that low probability chance that you don't, boy, that's a high political cost you bear. You have abrogated Biden's pledge to restore bipartisanship, and you fail to deliver in the process. All the political blame falls on you. So, and I think there's a risk for Republicans to not compromise and not try to get to 60 on these big things, because if Democrats do succeed with budget reconciliation on COVID relief, then they get all the credit for doing so, and Republicans look like a bunch of babies. So they have some political interest to say, hey, we're not going to be callous about this public health crisis and economic crisis. We're going to do our part to shape this bill. And again, not every Republican has to agree to that. Mitch McConnell doesn't even have to agree to that. You have to find 10. I'm not saying 10 is easy. I'm saying you don't need McConnell to be one of those 10 to get that done. Now, so that's all about, so large extent with the organizing agreement there, but let's get more specific about COVID relief. What are the signals there? How do we analyze what is being said so far to determine if there is an opening here to get to 60? I see folks quote anchors on Fox News or pundits on Fox News or people like Rand Paul knee-jerk quickly condemning Biden's inaugural address, claiming he was for unity, but clearly calling us a bunch of racists, spreading those quotes around to suggest, again, nothing's changed here. We're as polarized as ever. No point talking to these folks. And I think the problem with those sorts of conclusions is you are missing other quotes that are being said that are not so incendiary and polarizing, but people are not as inclined to share them, on social media. So today, Sunday morning, you have Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was asked about where we are with COVID relief, and he said, "Excuse me for a second, I'll get the exact wording." Said, "Well, I think at this early stage, just having passed over $900 billion in relief, that before we were to pass a new program, we need to understand where the money is going. Are these to individuals or to entities that really need the help? How has the first $900 billion we just passed a couple of weeks ago, how has that been distributed? Most of it hasn't been yet. What impact will that have? But if there's need, if there are areas where in our $900 billion package we did not recognize a particular problem, why we should focus on that and provide the additional resources that are necessary." So I'm open to that discussion. I want to see hear what the White House has to say. But at the same time, I think people recognize it's important that we don't borrow hundreds of billions, actually trillions of dollars from the Chinese for things that may not be absolutely necessary. This is a time to act with prudence and care. So that's Mitt Romney this morning, and I think it tracks what Susan Collins said recently. She similarly said we just passed something here, so I want to see what's being proposed before I make any judgments. I think what she said was along those lines, and I was also struck by a Washington Post piece that ran over the weekend, where the headline suggested that the Republican senators were digging in their heels and sounding very skeptical about a relief package. But if you actually read the article and looked at the quotes in the article, you get a different flavor. So again, the headline was, "Turned off by Biden's approach, GOP opposition to stimulus relief intensifies." Roy Blunt, pretty high up in the Republican leadership, pretty conservative guy from Missouri, he said about Biden's initial proposal, "I suspect the whole package is a non-starter, but it's got plenty of starters in it." Now, that's not saying he's not open for business. Compare that to what John Boehner said in the first week of the Obama presidency. Now, mind you, Boehner had some happy bipartisan talk too. It wasn't like he was scorching the earth right off the bat. He was saying things like, "We made it clear we want to work with the new president. He's made clear he wants to work with us. That's why we laid out our ideas at his invitation the other day. We want to continue to work with him to help fix this economy." But he also said, right now, given the concerns that we have over the size of this package and all of the spending in this package, we don't think it's going to work. And so if it's the plan that I see today, put me down in the no column. Now, what Boehner says there and what Blunt says there, it's not wildly disparate. But I do think there's a key difference in tone. It's one thing to say, I expect the whole package to be a non-starter, but it's got plenty of starters in it. That's saying I would keep some of what is in Biden's package. That's different than saying I'm a no. It's not literally 180 degrees apart, but I do think there is some difference in body language there. Senator Mike Rounds from South Dakota was on Meet the Press this morning, and he said, "I think the bigger issue is whether or not we're going to be specific on COVID relief. If we want to do those other items such as that, talking about minimum wage, let's break it out. Let's separate out. Take the time and do it correct." That was Mike Rounds. And he said previously that I really don't think that we're that far off in regard to the direction for COVID relief, specifically in targeted areas. I think we all want to make sure we were properly funded, the availability of vaccines, a good plan for getting it out in all states. The real challenge is whether or not Democrats are prepared to perhaps release some of the items that are not specifically targeted to COVID relief. Again, talk about minimum wage there. Look, Biden put forth, this is me now, not Rounds. Biden put forth a very, very big package with lots and lots of stuff in it as his opening bid. Biden is not this is not Biden's first negotiation. This is the stuff that, the left has always asked that Democrats do, go big to start, push the boundaries of the Overton window, and then negotiate from there. That's what's happening from Biden's perspective. And the Republican response is, we don't agree with this from top to bottom, but some of the stuff in it is okay, and let's talk. I mean, again, I can't tell you that means it's a guarantee they're going to come to an agreement. They very well may not, but I wouldn't write a news story saying that they are deeply opposed when the initial body language is, hey, there's some common ground here, let's talk. So I would just suggest, as we go forth here, be extra careful at tracking what Republicans are saying. You don't want to be a sucker. Republicans might say a lot of nice things and string you along and then not follow through at some point. There's deal or no deal. There's a passage in Obama's new memoir where after Max Baucus was pleading with Obama to say, I'm working on Chuck Grassley, he's going to come around, trust me, and months go by, and finally Obama brings Grassley into his office, and Obama says, is there anything I can do to get you on board? And Grassley sheepishly says no. That day may come, and I can't, I'm sure the question is going to be asked, to, annoying people like me and others, how many days is it? How many days do you give these folks? And I'm not going to give you a day. I'm not going to say if they don't do it in 14 days, therefore it means they can't do it. I think you judge the situation based on how serious negotiations are going. And I'm not being in the room, I'm not in a position to kind of make those judgment calls. I know, in fact, I think as we speak, if it hasn't broken up already, there's a 16-person bipartisan group of mostly senators talking with the White House aide, seeing what the common ground might be. The Biden administration and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are going to have to make a judgment. How real is this negotiation, and is it worth continuing? Because if we can get the 60, if we make it bipartisan, that's going to be a good thaw and perhaps make future negotiations a lot easier. And if we go to reconciliation right away, maybe we can get it through, but we're putting a lot of burden on ourselves to be in total unison and maybe cutting off our ability to pass other things in the future because we can't do reconciliation for everything. So I would just suggest, don't base what's going on in the Republican Party by the worst of what's being said on Fox News right now. You want to dig a little deeper and find the comments being made that won't get readily shared because it doesn't serve anyone's partisan interest to share them, to try to judge are there real openings here? Just want to take a few of the questions on live chat before we wrap things up. Wouldn't filibuster removal benefit Republicans? Could you see any Republican supporting reform? Filibuster reform, I think, is theoretically possible. I'm not banking on it today, but I do think short of filibuster abolition could be agreed upon. We're talking filibusters and the like. Particularly if some Republicans felt if they don't agree to a reform, that going nuclear might happen within a year's time. They might think, hey, this might take the pressure off and we can still have the filibuster. And removing it would have been for Republicans. So my argument has always been that as much as you might get short-term benefit by removing it, the potential cost is as easier as it is to pass things. It's also then easier to repeal things because the pendulum's going to swing. And my great example is always Australian carbon tax. Their parliamentary system there doesn't have a filibuster. Labor Party passed a carbon tax. The Liberal Party, which is the Conservatives there, they railed against it. They won the next election. They repealed it basically first thing. And that not only is bad for having a reform stick, I think it's bad for just governance in general. That's very destabilizing. So that's why I'm very hesitant about it. If a COVID bill doesn't pass before an impeachment trial, it's a blank disaster. correct. Impeachment's going to happen, it looks like, in a couple of weeks. I don't think they need to pass a relief bill that quickly because they did just pass one. So I don't think that you have that same sense of extra urgency. And in fact, it might be worth having a little extra time to see if getting to 60 is a real possibility or not, because they're not going to take the Biden bill, as it stands. So, working through where the common ground might be might take a little bit of time. And if that's passed, with in 2009 when it was Obama and the economy was in literal free fall, and if they didn't act right away, you might have had a full blown depression. That was a much more time sensitive period. Now you have some relief in the system. You have vaccines coming in, so there's some light at the end of the tunnel. I do think that takes away some of the urgency, and if it's something got passed in February or even March, I don't think that means that the whole Biden presidency is over and done with, and because the economy is going to be a disaster. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. One last question: is there any chance of DC statehood? And I think, you're never going to get DC statehood on a bipartisan 60 Senate vote on its own. When I was younger, people used to talk about pairing DC statehood with some carving up of states, or giving a state an extra electoral vote to balance it out, or putting DC into Maryland or Virginia so they get voting rights that way. Those are the only kinds of schemes I think that could get a bipartisan vote, because it would not be seen as a partisan power grab. Anything that is a partisan that is intended to be enhancing for the Democrats, you can't get on 60 votes, and then you could only do through getting rid of the filibuster, nuclear option, which again Manchin and Sinema have already said they're not going to do. So I'm very skeptical of that happening unless bipartisan compromises along with that include DC statehood or DC enfranchisement occur. One more here: Biden passes $1,400 in checks. Arguably, that Trump sent more direct stimulus. 1,200 plus signature, not good for Dems. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I don't think. There's obviously going to be some sharing of credit because there were relief bills passed on Trump's watch. So Democrats will never be able to take total credit for it the way they could more reasonably with Obama's stimulus. Although even in that case, TARP happened, pre-Obama, but no one wanted to take credit for TARP, so that was less of an issue there. I think that, and I think part of the argument that Biden can make to Republicans is, look, we're not trying to get all the credit here. We would like it to be shared. We would like you to come on board and make this a 60 vote thing. And that's good for Biden, because Biden said he'd restore bipartisanship, and if he follows through on that, that's good for him. Why it's always so hard is there's a partisan incentive to make the other guy look as bad as possible. And that can be very good for electoral purposes, although obviously it's only good for one party, not the other. And that mentality is not so great for governing. Governing usually requires some degree of bipartisanship. So I don't think it is a worry on Biden's part if someone can slice the numbers and say more relief came on Trump's watch than Biden's watch. I don't think he's going to care. What he's going to care about is, while I was there, I made Washington work in a functional way again, and we got things done and helped people. And beyond that, people can spin how they want to spin. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in for this edition of Scherable. If you like this, please subscribe on YouTube. Please support it financially at patreon.com/BillShare. Check out the History Podcast, When America Worked, at Scherable.com and on your favorite podcast services. And I'll see you back here real soon. Take care.